It's been a week since Edith M. Carroll died. She was found dead in her bathroom, having choked on something. It's an eerie fact, but most people who choke to death do so in their bathroom. Instead of running outside to get help, they go into the bathroom to try and cough it up, often locking the door out of habit. I don't like to think about it. She deserved better. A lot of people don't know about Edith. Some might call her the part-time lady at the bakery or the one who worked in administration at the local community college. Not a lot of people know that in the late 1970s, she was a co-writer for a horror movie. As of her passing, I'm the last living member of the film crew. Given the events that took place, most of us collectively agreed to never talk openly about it. Seeing as there's no one left to trouble, I figured it's high time someone pulled back the curtain. And now someone about to hit 70, now it's not the time to wait for better days. I was born in 1957. I finished my studies during the height of the Vietnam War, and by the time I turned 20, we were knee-deep in psychedelics and a stagnating economy. I was working part-time at the cinema, trying to save up enough to follow my on-again, off-again girlfriend to San Francisco. We broke up when she left town to pursue a degree in economics. Through my cinema job, I got to know a few regulars, the kind of people who were first in line with every new release. One of these regulars was a man named Seb. The guy drove an azure blue 68 Frog Eye Sprite and always had something interesting to tell. Little bits of trivia about whatever movie he came to see. Over the course of a few months, we became good friends. I handed him the occasional free popcorn, and he talked my ear off about whatever movie was showing. Turns out, Seb was a gaffer. He handled electronics, mostly lights, on small-scale movie sets. At the initial showing of The Hills Have Eyes, Seb was first in line. He was more eager than usual. He'd actually shaved off his beard and combed his hair even without bringing a date, like he often did. He paid for his popcorn and gave me a $20 tip. "Heading out tomorrow," he said. "Got a job out of state, heading for the big leagues." "Doing a movie?" I asked. "Like a real one?" "As real as it gets," he grinned. "Big budget stuff." "Promise you'll be back for the first screening, all right?" Yeah, he nodded. "It's happening." I handed him his popcorn and a Coke. Seb stopped. He looked up, squinted at me, and sighed, nodding to himself. He finally smiled. "You want a job?" Seb needed an equipment assistant. You can get a long way with a shared love of cinema and a can-do attitude, at least back then. I signed on so fast his popcorn didn't get cold. Not before long, I was handed the official title of Gaffer's Assistant, or Best Boy Grip. We were given a few days to prepare. We were joining a film crew up in New England, but most of the crew were Midwestern. Our first meetup would be on site in a small coastline town just northeast of Brunswick. I joined Seb on a long drive all the way up there in the middle of the summer. Blasting music all the way, we took turns road tripping cross country. The Frog Eye was a beast to handle. He told me all about the movie in excruciating detail. It was the passion project of a writer gone director named Roy Hampton. He'd mostly worked in advertising and network TV, so this was a sort of breakout project. Still, it was a lot of money involved. Seb had no idea where the financing was even coming from. The movie had signed on a strange actor from Dallas named Dawn Anderson, who was making her debut on the big screen. The script was an adaptation of a story called The Crown of EO by a turn-of-the-century writer named Emmett A. Rask. It was originally intended as a sort of drama piece, but it had been rewritten into a horror script inspired by movies like The Wicker Man, Rosemary's Baby, and The Omen. I remember Seb talking about it. Even while driving, he was enthusiastically waving his hands around, talking as much with his body as with his mouth. He couldn't stop smiling. That man loved his job. We went past Brunswick to the coastline town of Chatterblinds. There were less than 1,000 people living there in total, so there was little in the way of amenities, but enough to make ourselves comfortable. Some of the crew had rented out what little rooms there were at the local B&B. Others were bringing caravans and minibuses. Just going through town, we could see a couple of trailers lined up by the side of the road. Seb seemed to know some of the people we passed. He waved as we made our way through town. Every other street or so, someone would look up and wave back. It was shaping up to be a beautiful summer. There was a fenced-off area at the outskirts of town where we turned in. We followed a bumpy dirt road lined with birch trees, along a solid chain-linked fence with a guarded gate up front. Seb handed over his ID to one of the security guards. Took them a while to find him on the list, but he was on there. Digman, the guard said. Sebastian Digman? You haven't signed up for on-site housing. Camping out? Seb smiled, nodding towards the trunk of his car. My assistant here could use a place to crash, though. Got some spare tents by the equipment lot, and some folks are bringing in folding cots to the mess hall. It ain't much, but y'all are free to grab what you need. Seb turned to me. I could see my reflection in his wide-framed sunglasses. What you thinking? He asked. You camping out or sticking to the mess hall? Mess hall? I grinned back. You know that's where the party's gonna be at. Seb gave me a sheepish grin as the gates opened. We rolled in without a word. The guard waved us off. Good luck and God bless. I spent the rest of the day hanging on to Seb for dear life. We were chasing down scripts and inventory lists, double-checking that everything he'd asked for was there. Every cable, every box of screws, every replacement bulb. Seb was a goof, but about this one particular thing, he was a machine. Meticulous. I did get to see some of the other folks in the periphery. The special effects team were hard at work going something over with the scriptwriter. I think Edith was there too. The main scriptwriter was scratching his head and redlining revisions, assisted by his co-writer Edith. I caught a glimpse of the director as well, having a heated discussion with the camera crew. I saw Dawn, the main lead. She was simultaneously comparing notes between two different scripts, as they hadn't settled on which one to go for yet. I think that was the only day when I didn't see her wearing some kind of blue sundress, the iconic getup of her character. Seb had managed to get a hold of an earlier script and went through the scene markups. I was sealing up boxes with this thick industrial tape while he smoked, flipping through the pages. It was all done by typewriter, and there were smudges of ink on his fingers. He renamed it again, he sighed. First it was the Crown of Io, then the Queen of Black Sands, and now... He held it up, red text on a white background. End of Eternity. I nodded. Creepy. I'll probably change it again, he said between puffs of smoke. Sounds too artsy, European. We're not going to be a full-C film. He ripped out one of the pages and handed the rest over to me. It was massive. What's the runtime on this thing? I scoffed. 12 hours? Original was about 3.5, he said, shaking his head. They've cut it down to 3. Final version is probably about 2.5. He handed the ripped out page back to me and put his cigarette out on a nearby fuse box. Throw it away when you're done, he said, stretching out. It's already old news. Later that night, we all gathered in the mess hall. There was a surprising amount of staff, numbering close to 100. I was in the thick of it, stuck between technicians, extras, costume designers, makeup artists. Everyone was there, shoulder to shoulder. Seb was somewhere up front. Roy Hampton took center stage, stepping up on top of a rickety plastic table. He threw his arms out, gesturing towards us, and was met with a big cheer. I couldn't help but to join in. To the end of eternity, he laughed. He was a thin man in his early 40s, a thinning hairline underscored by a large pair of round reading glasses and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a colorful turtleneck sweater, despite the summer heat. Others joined in, repeating end of eternity like an eager echo. Tomorrow is the first day of shooting. Scene markups will be out in a couple of hours, so get ready for a late night and an early morning. That don't mean we can't have fun. He laughed, smacking his hands together. Others joined in. I want you all to take some time and reflect on where you are. What you're about to do to make our mark on cinema history in a way that no one's done before. No matter what we end up making here, no matter the outcome, we have already won. There was a surge of applause. I could hear Seb up front doing a loud whistle. It's gonna be rough, but it's a space for miracles to happen. Take some time to get caught up to speed, then take the night off. Work hard, play hard. That last sentiment was echoed the loudest, and by the time Roy stepped down, I could tell someone was already lighting up some refreshments in the crowd. Seb didn't need me for the rest of the day, so I stuck around the mess hall. I got a tour of the equipment sign-out lot and was handed a sleeping bag and a folding cot. By the time I got back, the mess hall was jumping with energy. Someone had brought a whole bunch of kiss tapes, along with plenty of drinks. There were 4 six-packs on one of the counters with a large note that just said, "Everyone drinks." I wasn't going to pass on that. I had a couple of drinks, a couple of smokes, and did my best to remember the lyrics to shout it out loud. I huddled up with a bunch of background extras that were scheduled for the next day, playing a mix of Truth or Dare and Battleship. Don't ask about the rules to that one. I didn't have the slightest idea. I talked to people from all over. Some of the practical effects guys were complete geeks, comparing notes on everything from timed explosions to faking a scalding water effect. I remember sharing a beer with the writers too. All in all, it was a good time. I think I made out with Don's hairdresser. Somewhere around midnight, about a dozen more people joined us. They looked a bit more businessy, having starched white shirts and black ties. They were all smiles though, but I could tell they were a bit hesitant to join us. I didn't hear much about who they were, just the occasional dismissal. "We're just finishing up," one of them said. "Long day. Someone's got to lock up," another said. "Making sure we're set for tomorrow." We didn't mind. This was a closed set, and with the amount of staff we had on board, there were bound to be a few unfamiliar faces. Still, there was one face I couldn't look away from. A woman in her late 50s. She was the only one of them who didn't smile. Her rose blonde hair was sort of pushed down, as if she'd worn a hat or a cap for most of the day. She too was wearing a white shirt, buttoned up all the way to her throat. I only caught a glimpse of her briefly before she disappeared into the back. I didn't think much of it. Still, I'll never forget that face. It was telling me something. I nodded at our counter full of free-to-take refreshments and urged one of them to join us. I was met with an immediate headshake and an apologetic smile, with a vague excuse about an early morning. But I noticed, as soon as they thought I wasn't looking, that their smile faded. Their eyes grew cold. As they looked around the room, I didn't see a kindness in their eyes or a sense of belonging. I saw disgust. What happened next is etched in my memory. The woman with the pressed down hair came back, dragging a camera along on a tripod dolly. One of our 3 main cameras for this entire shoot. Top of the line kind of stuff. Expensive as all hell. Coming back into the mess hall, she pushed it. It came crashing down, stopping every conversation in the room. All that remained were the voices of Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, singing their hearts out. Seconds later, one of the men with white shirts picked up our 8-track player and smashed it against the side of a table. People got up on their feet, as the woman who destroyed our camera was handed a shovel by a guy coming out of the storage closet. Turning it to the side, she chopped down on the camera like she was cutting firewood. Plastic, glass, metal, and electronics all broken and torn into ribbons. She was completely unhinged, grunting like an animal with every strike. People started to filter out through the doors. She looked up at us with tears flowing from her eyes, her face red from exertion and anger. "Horse," she cried. "You faithless horse." She bawled her eyes out, smashing the camera to pieces. As the men in the white shirts advanced, screams erupted. Panic. I was too far from the exits to get out in time. One of the men zeroed in on me, following me through the mess hall. We circled the table back and forth like something out of a cartoon. Finally, he got fed up and tried to jump across. I had to think fast and ducked, pushing the table up. The weight caused it to flip, sending him sprawling onto the floor. That's when I first noticed that he was holding a knife. There were two main doors leading out of the mess hall, and one leading further into the building to the equipment lot. The door closest to me, leading outside, was closed. The others had gotten out and barricaded it. The other door leading out was on the far side of the room, across from at least 6 of these people. The only other way out was through the equipment lot, right by the woman with a shovel. I didn't really have a choice. I burst into a sprint, knocking over 2 chairs along the way. The plastic pitter-patter against the linoleum floor felt like a mockery. The woman with a shovel wasn't prepared, but she took a swing at me, crashing through 3 empty bottles on the counter as she did. I got by, but not by a great margin. The equipment lot was much larger than it had any right to be. It had been used as a sort of industrial warehouse a decade earlier, and we didn't need more than a quarter of it. Rushing through the door, I saw 2 other men in white shirts pouring turpentine into a box of cables. I had to think fast. Right around the corner, I'd been sorting out equipment with Zeb earlier. Keeping up a full sprint, I went straight for the lights. I heard approaching footsteps trying to keep up behind me. Thinking back on where I'd seen Seb put out his cigarette, I rounded a corner, almost tripped over a cheap plastic chair, and grabbed the fuse box. With 2 clicks, I first turned the power off, then ripped out whatever fuses I could grab in the dark. Then I slowly crept backwards, squeezing into a small space behind one of the industrial-sized shelves. There was no backplate to the shelf, so if they had flashlights, they'd see me instantly. But I was banking hard on them not bringing anything but knives and pipes. As long as it was dark, they wouldn't find me. I tried to steady my breathing and keep still. My belt buckle kept tapping against the metal siding, forcing me to put my hand in between. I was scorching hot, having to brush away a sweaty strand of hair to not get poked in the eye. I just stood there, waiting. I could hear them approaching, a knife running across thick metal bars. Footsteps slowing down. There were at least 3 of them now. A whisper in the dark. The woman with a shovel. "You think bringing him back will be your salvation?" She laughed. "Do you honestly think in your heart of hearts that he will do anything but to suck your spirit dry?" I didn't answer. I held my breath. "You cursed, demented people," she spat. "You don't consider that what do you do have consequences?" Way in the back of the storage area, I could see a cone of light. They'd found a flashlight. They started to yell at one another to find the other cameras. One of them were cutting up cables, and another had set fire to a small box of spare parts. They were almost out of turpentine and were now looking for something easily flammable to pile on. I could see the vague outline of the woman with a shovel, her heavy panting making her shoulders rise and fall. "Killing you is doing you a favor," she shrieked. "I'm not killing. I'm protecting the innocent. I'm protecting the people who matter. She smacked the shovel against the side of a shelf, making it rattle. A clang rung out, bouncing against the corrugated walls. It made the wall vibrate, tickling my spine. "Where are the cameras?" There was chatter up front. One of them was relaying something important. The others had started to pack up, grabbing whatever they could, and leaving through the front. As they did, they scanned the room a final time looking for our cameras or tapes. I figured they were with the director. He'd probably be up reviewing test footage ahead of the first shoot. As the flashlight panned across the room, I caught a brief glimpse of the woman with a shovel. She had this wide-eyed look on her face, like she'd never blinked. Her cheeks were stained with tears. Destroy yourself, she cried out. Debauch yourself and choke, you worm. Dropping the shovel as if ending the conversation, she took a quick look around the room, and I think right before she left, she caught a glimpse of me. I felt a dark lump sink into my stomach. There was hesitation. She peered down at the shovel. Then she left. I don't know how long I stood there. I felt like I'd fused with the ground, like my shoes were too heavy to move. It wasn't until I heard sirens in the distance that I hurried back to the fuse box. My hands were shaking so bad that it took me 3 tries to put it all back. Hitting the switch, the light came back on, showing little but scattered tools and a burned box as witnesses to what happened back there. People were gathering around the mess hall. I joined them outside, my legs visibly shaking. There was an uncomfortable coastline chill running through the summer night, carrying an unfamiliar smell. 2 police vehicles approached in the distance as we counted off everyone who'd been inside. Turns out, these people had a little help from the inside. 4 of the crew members and a night guard had up and left with them, leaving behind a broken gate, slashed tires, and several smashed windshields. They'd started a fire in one of the trailers, but it had burned out without causing too much damage. Still, people were shook. Some talked about leaving. There was an emergency crew meeting. Our security chief promised far and wide about how they'd take extra measures before hiring any locals, and that they'd double patrols. They promised that they'd figure out what was going on and the motivation behind this. They assured us that they'd coordinate their efforts with the police and that we were free to add our testimony. I didn't even notice Zeb shuffling up next to me, trying to speak over the sound of the shouting and the worried murmurs. I was worried this would happen, he sighed. It's a controversial script. You know these people? I know their type, he added. Look, just be careful. I thought it'd be fine, but... He looked over to me, patted me on the back, and leaned in. I don't know who's financing all this, he whispered. But whoever it is has deep pockets and access to some weird, esoteric shit. Leaning away, he put his fingers under his eyes, as if to say, watch out, and retreated into the crowd. Over time, we all retreated back into tents, trailers, or whatever cheap mattress we could find. It was an uneasy night. I saw that woman's face every time I closed my eyes. I could hear the clang of metal on metal. There were still broken plastic from the camera scattered across the mess hall. Hell, the shovel was still lying there in the middle of the equipment lot. At some point, in the middle of the night, I went outside to have a cigarette. The night air was rough, tugging at my clothes. The wind rattled the chain-link fence. I got up and wandered all the way to the edge of the fence. And in the distance, I could see something. I stomped down my cigarette and peered across the small dirt road leading up to the set. White birch trees swaying back and forth, making the wind whistle through the leaves. And there, hanging from the branches, were dozens of neatly pressed white shirts with black ties. A final reminder that this was far from over. It had just begun.